I still remember the smell of burnt sugar that night. It wasn't from the kitchen. It was from the candle she had forgotten to blow out. The one that melted down to nothing while she laughed in someone else's arms. I came home late, flour still on my sleeves, fingertips raw from kneading dough. I had been testing a new recipe, something small, sweet, caramelized, something she used to love. I wanted to surprise her. Her car was in the driveway. Lights were on. Music hummed softly through the thin walls. I thought she was waiting for me. I opened the door quietly, expecting her to turn, to smile, to ask me how my day went. Instead, I heard it first, the laughter, deep, confident, masculine. Then her voice, lighter than air, the same voice that used to whisper my name. I froze in the hallway. Through the crack in the door, I saw her, dressed in silk, her hand resting on a man's chest. He was older, expensive-looking, the kind of man who smelled like imported cigars and power. My breath caught somewhere between disbelief and pain. My heart beat loud enough to drown out the music. When she saw me standing there, she didn't even flinch. "Evan," she said calmly, as if she'd been expecting this moment. "You shouldn't have come home early." That was all. No guilt, no apology, just exhaustion in her voice, as if I were the burden. He smiled at me, smug and silent, as if my heartbreak were entertainment. I left without a word. Outside, the night was cold enough to burn. For days, I moved like a ghost. The kitchen, my temple, felt like a battlefield. Every cutting board, every whisk, every pan reminded me of her laughter, her touch, her taste. I couldn't cook. I couldn't even look at food. I'd always believed that love and cooking were the same thing. Both demanded patience, passion, and a willingness to burn a little to get it right. But now, everything tasted like ashes. She left the next morning, taking her clothes, her perfume, and the last of my hope. I didn't fight it. Maybe I should have. But all I could do was stand at the window and watch her drive away with him in his silver car. Sunlight glinting off the rearview mirror like a final goodbye. That night, I threw out the caramel recipe I had made for her. The pages tore easily, but the memory clung like smoke. I started sleeping in the kitchen. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound that didn't hurt. Weeks passed. Rent piled up. The restaurant I worked at closed too few customers. Too many bills. I was 32. Heartbroken, broke, and without direction. One night, while walking through the city, I stopped by a row of food trucks. People lined up in the freezing air, waiting for tacos, noodles, anything hot. Their laughter echoed through the street like music. I stood there for a long time, watching the steam rise, smelling the spices, the sizzling oil. Something inside me stirred. Cooking had always been my way of loving, my way of healing. Maybe it could be that again. I sold my last decent possession, her old camera, and bought a used grill, a folding table, and a bag of ingredients. I set up on the corner of 5th and Maple with nothing but hope, and a handwritten sign, Evans Street Kitchen, taste made with heart. The first night no one came. The second, a few curious faces. The third, a small crowd. Someone filmed me while I cooked, laughing, tossing noodles in the air, flames rising like art. They posted it on TikTok. The next morning my phone was full of notifications. Thousands of views, hundreds of comments. People wanted to find me. And for the first time in months, I smiled. The fourth night, I ran out of ingredients before midnight. The line stretched down the block, a crowd of faces lit by the orange glow of my grill. People laughed, filmed, and called out my name like I was someone they already knew. "Evan, flip it again. Do that fire trick." I played along. I flipped. I laughed. I let the flames rise higher than I should have. Because for the first time since she left, I felt alive. Each order I served carried a piece of my heart. Every plate was an apology to myself for giving up so easily. By the end of the week, someone messaged me. "Hey chef, you're blowing up online. You should start a TikTok account. People are obsessed with your energy." I did. I posted my first video, me cooking noodles in the night wind, oil sizzling, smoke curling like ghosts above the pan. I wrote one line beneath it. I lost everything, so I started cooking again. It went viral overnight. Her name was Lila. I met her on a Wednesday 2 weeks after my first viral video. She stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, dark hair, a camera slung over her shoulder, eyes like late summer rain. She didn't film me right away. She watched. After the rush, she approached. "You cook like you're trying to remember something," she said softly. I didn't know what to say. "I guess I am," I replied. She smiled, small, almost secret. "I'm a food blogger, or at least I used to be. Maybe I could help you tell your story properly." Normally, I didn't trust anyone new, but something about her tone, calm, genuine, made me nod. She started coming every night, filming, photographing, asking about recipes, ingredients, memories. We talked between orders, over the sound of sizzling oil and laughter. She'd ask about my favorite dish, and I'd tell her stories of my mother's kitchen, of learning to cook barefoot on tiled floors, of dreams I thought I'd buried. She'd listen, eyes soft, like each word mattered. Sometimes when she smiled at me across the smoke and streetlight, I forgot what heartbreak felt like. The city began to know my name. TikTok wasn't just videos anymore. It was people driving miles just to taste my food. Food bloggers came, influencers, local journalists. Someone called me the fire poet. I laughed at first, but the name stuck. Lila's videos caught the rhythm of it. The flick of a pan, the rise of flame, the laughter that had come back into my chest. She told my story without ever making it tragic. Instead, she made it beautiful. One evening, as we cleaned up, she said, "You don't cook to impress. You cook to heal." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I realized she was right. Every night behind that stand was therapy, redemption, resurrection, and maybe, just maybe, love was starting to taste different. It happened on a Friday. A black car pulled up beside the stand. Sleek, silver rims. The kind of car I'd seen once before. She stepped out. Same hair, same perfume. Only now her smile looked practiced, too bright, too polished. "Evan," she said, as if my name still belonged to her. "I saw you online. You've changed." The crowd was watching, curious. Lila froze beside the camera, uncertain. I felt my pulse quicken, not from love but from something sharper. I'd spent months rebuilding what she broke. And now here she was, acting like she could just walk back into the warmth of my fire. "I had to," I said quietly. "You left me with nothing but hunger." She tilted her head, pretending to be wounded. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "He wasn't who I thought he was, but you. You've become someone I can't stop thinking about. Before I might have melted, but now I saw the truth behind her eyes. Envy, not love." I looked past her to Lila, who stood watching, silent, steady. The one who had seen me rebuild from ashes without asking for anything. And in that moment I understood something. The fire that destroyed me had also forged me. I turned back to the woman who had once been my whole world and said, "I'm not hungry for your love anymore." That night, the street smelled like sesame oil and rain. Lila stayed after the crowd left, helping me pack up. Neither of us spoke much. The silence felt easy, like music without words. When we were done, she looked at me and said, "You didn't need her to see your worth. You just needed to taste it yourself." I laughed softly. "Maybe, but I think you helped me find the flavor." She smiled, eyes shining under the streetlight. Then, for the first time in months, I reached for someone not out of loneliness, but out of peace. Her hand was warm, steady, real. And as the last of the smoke curled into the night sky, I realized the fire was never my enemy. It was my rebirth. Part 3. The Taste of Tomorrow. To be continued. In the next part, Evan and Lila begin to build something together, a restaurant born from the streets, a love born from ashes, and a story of creation stronger than betrayal. It started raining the night I found the building. The city was soaked in silver, neon lights blurred through the downpour, and my little food stand was half drowned. I had no umbrella, no shelter, just the hiss of the grill against the rain, and the ache of exhaustion in my bones. Leela showed up anyway. She always did. She ran through the rain with her camera under her jacket, laughing like a child. "You're insane," I told her. She grinned. "And you're out here frying dumplings in a thunderstorm. Don't talk to me about sanity." When we finally packed up, she pointed across the street to a boarded-up cafe. Broken windows, faded paint, a for-lease sign barely hanging. "Maybe it's time to get a roof over your fire," she said softly. I looked at the building, crumbling, small, forgotten. But something about it, the crooked doorway, the ghosts of old laughter on the walls, felt right. I didn't have the money, not even close. But I had a feeling. And in my life, feelings were the only thing that ever led to something worth tasting. We called it Firebird. The name came from Lila. "Because you rose from the ashes," she said, smiling. We spent weeks painting, sanding, cleaning. The air was thick with dust and hope. Lila filmed every step. Me covered in paint, her balancing on ladders, both of us laughing until our ribs hurt. Sometimes, late at night, we'd sit on the floor eating instant noodles out of the same bowl, planning the menu by candlelight. I wanted to feel alive, I told her. Like street food met a dream, and they decided to dance. She laughed. "You sound like a poet again." Maybe I was, by the time the sign went up, Firebird, by Evan Hale. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Home. The night we opened. I couldn't stop shaking. The line outside stretched down the block again, the same way it had back when I started. But this time, it wasn't just a crowd. It was a community. People who had followed my story from the beginning. The air inside shimmered with heat and noise, frying oil, music, laughter. I saw faces I knew from the street, from TikTok, even a few old chefs from my past. And in the corner, my ex, watching. Not with envy this time, but regret. She didn't approach me, and I didn't look away. Some ghosts are best left unspoken. Instead, I focused on the living. The smiling faces, the clatter of plates, the sound of Lila's laughter as she filmed the moment we had built from dust. When the last order left the kitchen, she walked up to me, her eyes shining. "You did it," she whispered. I shook my head. We did. Success came slowly, then all at once. Articles, interviews, awards. From heartbreak to hope, they called it. Every time I heard the phrase, I smiled, because they didn't know the half of it. It wasn't just about cooking. It was about finding myself in the fire I once feared. Layla stayed by my side through all of it. Never in the spotlight. Always behind the camera, capturing the quiet moments. The first morning coffee in the restaurant. The way I still burn the first pancake of every batch. The way I look at her when she's not looking. One night, long after closing, we sat on the roof above the restaurant. The city glowed beneath us, endless and alive. "I used to think love was something that happens once," I said, "and if you lose it, it's gone forever." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "And now? Now I know love is like cooking," I said. "You burn, you fail, you start again. But every time it tastes a little deeper, a little more like you." She smiled, quiet and full of light. And in that silence, I realized that I was no longer a man broken by betrayal. I was a man remade by fire, flavor, and forgiveness. Years later, when people talk about Firebird, they say it's a place that feels alive, where every dish tells a story. They taste the sweetness of caramelized onions and never know that once I burned sugar trying to hold on to love. They hear laughter in the kitchen and never realize it rose from the ruins of heartbreak. Sometimes late at night, when the restaurant is empty and the city sleeps, I still stand by the stove, eyes closed, listening to the hiss of the pan, the rhythm of my own breath. And I whisper, not to her, not even to Lila, but to the fire itself. Thank you for not giving up on me. Success has a taste. It's rich, intoxicating, and just a little bitter. 2 years after Firebird opened, we were fully booked every night. There were lines out the door, people taking photos of every plate, every wall, every word I said. At first I loved it. Then I began to feel something else. The quiet, invisible weight of expectation. Every review, every post, every handshake, it all came with questions I never asked for. How does it feel to be famous? When's your next restaurant? What's your secret? My secret was that I still woke up afraid it could all vanish, afraid that without the fire of hunger I'd forget how to cook with heart. Lila noticed before I did. She'd find me standing in the dark kitchen long after everyone went home, staring at the stove like it might answer something. Evan, she'd whisper, touching my shoulder, you don't have to prove anything anymore. But I wasn't sure she was right. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of day that feels harmless until it isn't. A journalist came for an interview. Slick smile, perfect suit, voice like honey and steel. He asked all the usual things about my recipes, my past, the fire that changed my life. Then too casually he said, I've spoken with someone who knew you before all this. She says you used to be a very different man. I froze. I didn't have to ask who he meant. He smiled, sensing the reaction. Would you ever consider reconciling with her? For the story, I mean. The public loves a redemption arc. I laughed, sharp, humorless. I already had one. But later that night when the restaurant was quiet, her face returned in memory. The same one that once shattered me. Not with desire, not even with anger. Just a strange hollow ache, the kind that whispers, what if? Lila saw the change in me. She always did. Who was he? She asked, her voice calm, but her eyes searching. I lied. No one. And that was the first time I ever lied to her. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived at the restaurant. Ivory paper, gold lettering. Charity Gala. Sponsored by the Hale Foundation. Her family's name. My hands trembled slightly as I held it. Inside was a note, handwritten. I'd like to see you again. Not to reopen old wounds, but to close them properly. See, I should have thrown it away. But curiosity, that cruel, familiar hunger, won. Lila found the envelope later that night. She didn't ask what it was and I didn't offer. But the silence between us stretched wide and heavy, like smoke before a flame. The ballroom shimmered in gold and glass, the kind of place I never belonged to even when I had her. She was there, radiant, graceful, almost unchanged. Evan, she said softly, stepping closer. You look stronger. I had to be, I replied. She smiled, eyes glimmering with something unreadable. You've built something beautiful. I always knew you would. I wanted to tell her that wasn't true, that she never believed in me, never saw what I could be. But the anger had cooled long ago. What remained was only distance. We spoke for a while, politely like strangers pretending to be old friends. When she finally said, I'm happy for you, I almost believed her. But as I left, she touched my arm. Are you happy, Evan? It was such a simple question, and yet it felt heavier than gold. I didn't answer. When I came home that night, Lila was waiting. She had seen the photos online, me and my ex, laughing over champagne. The internet never sleeps. Why didn't you tell me you were going? Her voice wasn't angry. It was hurt, soft, quiet. I just needed to close a door, I said. She looked at me, eyes full of tears she refused to let fall. You can't close a door by walking through it again. The silence that followed was unbearable. She left before dawn. No shouting, no goodbye, just the sound of a door closing softly behind her. For the first time in years, the restaurant felt cold again. Days turned to weeks. I cooked without joy, without heart. The food was perfect, but lifeless. Customers still came, but I stopped seeing them. At night, I'd sit by the empty stove and wonder how something so bright could turn to ash again. It wasn't until I found Lila's camera, left behind in her usual corner, that I broke. Inside, the memory card was full of us, laughing, cooking, painting walls, standing under the first Firebird sign. And the last video, one she never showed me, was her voice, whispering behind the lens. If he ever forgets why he started, I hope he watches this and remembers. He didn't rise because he was broken. He rose because he believed in something worth burning for. I sat there for hours, replaying her words. Then I stood up, turned on the stove, and lit the flame. I found her 3 days later, at the pier, where we used to buy street food before the restaurant opened. She looked up as I approached, eyes wary but soft. "I'm sorry," I said, voice trembling. "You were right. I walked back into the fire I was meant to leave behind." Leela smiled faintly. "Did you get burned?" "Yeah," I whispered. But this time, I didn't lose myself. We stood there in silence, the sea wind cold and salt-sweet. Then, slowly, she reached out and took my hand. "Then maybe," she said, "we can start again. Not from the ashes, but from the warmth." And in that moment, I understood. You don't conquer fire. You learn to dance with it. Firebird still stands today, a little bigger, a little wiser. Leela runs the stories now. I run the kitchen. Sometimes when people ask how I built all this, I tell them the truth. I didn't build it. I burned for it. Because love, like cooking, isn't about perfection. It's about heat, and knowing when to let something go before it turns to ash. Time didn't steal from me. It simply rearranged what I had left. 10 years have passed since Firebird opened. The sign is worn now, edges softened by sun and rain, but every night the flame still burns. Not as wild as before, not as desperate, just steady. A heartbeat made of light. Lila and I never married. We never needed to. Our bond didn't ask for promises. It lived in every shared glance across the kitchen, every unspoken rhythm of two people who built a life from nothing but faith and heat. We stopped chasing fame long ago. Now the restaurant closes on Sundays. We spend the day walking through farmers' markets, tasting sauces from strangers, laughing like we did when the dream was still small enough to hold in our hands. Sometimes young chefs come to me, nervous and hungry. They call me Chef Hale now. With that mix of respect and fear I used to have for others, they ask for recipes. I tell them stories. One of them reminded me of myself, a boy named Mateo, all fire and no patience. He burned everything, the bread, the onions, even his temper. But he loved food the way I once did, recklessly, painfully, completely. One night he asked, "Chef, how did you know when you'd made it?" I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, "When I stopped cooking to prove something and started cooking just to feel something." He didn't understand yet. Neither did I at his age. But one day, he will. As the years went on, my hands began to ache. The knives felt heavier. My back reminded me that passion doesn't make you immortal. Leela noticed before I did, as always. "You don't have to be in the kitchen every night," she said softly one evening as we closed. "I know," I smiled, "but I want to be. It's the only place that ever felt like truth." She came up behind me, resting her head against my shoulder. "The truth doesn't need you to burn anymore, Evan, just to shine." I didn't answer, but that night I turned off the lights earlier than usual and stood outside, watching the last embers fade from the grill. The fire didn't roar like it used to. It glowed, gentle, patient. Like an old friend, it happened quietly. One rainy afternoon, a food critic, the same one who had reviewed my very first pop-up years ago, came back. Grey hair, kind eyes, camera slung around his neck. "I hear this is your last week in the kitchen," he said. I nodded. It's time. My apprentice is ready. He smiled. Then one last meal, chef, whatever your heart says. I cooked slowly, carefully, every motion a memory, caramelized onions, the scent that started it all, fresh herbs from Lila's garden, a drizzle of the same sauce I once burned, trying to impress the woman who left me. When I plated it, the critic asked, "What do you call this?" I looked at the dish, steam curling upward like smoke from the past. "Closure," I said. After that final service, I stayed alone in the kitchen. Lila was upstairs, humming softly, her camera resting on the counter. I sat at the table and began to write, not a recipe, not a confession, just a letter. To whoever finds this, if you are standing where I once stood, burned and broken, remember this: fire does not destroy, it reveals. The taste you're searching for isn't in the pan, or the fame, or the person you lost. It's in the moment you decide to try again. I folded the letter, placed it in the drawer beneath the stove, the same place where I once hid my fear, and then I turned out the lights. Now I wake to the smell of coffee instead of smoke. Lila sits across from me on the balcony, camera still in hand, hair silvering at the edges. Below us, the city hums, alive, restless, hungry. And somewhere out there, another young cook lights his first fire. I smile, take her hand and whisper, "Do you smell that?" She laughs. "What?" "Hope," I say. "It always smells like something's just starting to cook." The fire burns on. Not in my kitchen, not even in my hands, but in the hearts of those who believe that from every loss, something new can rise. Because life, in the end, is just like cooking. You can't control the heat, only what you create with it.